Thank you. Good evening to our viewers and candidates. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dr. Daniel Scheller. Members of our panel tonight will start with 1 minute for opening statements before we get into questions, where each candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. First response will go to a new candidate each time, rotating down the table left. We'll start with Mr. Hernandez. 1 minute for your opening statement.
Okay, hello everybody. Adam Hernandez, candidate for mayor. I have lived my whole life here in Lubbock. I'm a small business owner and a father. I've had 2 daughters. I lost my oldest to suicide in 2018. In the summer of 2020, I made a life choice to dedicate as much of my time as possible to community service, and so I've done that in a variety of ways over the last several years. Have also been heavily involved in shaping public policy here in Lubbock for the last several years. And my vision of Lubbock is one where we're financially stronger for the long term and less reliant on debt over time. And with that will come quality of life improvements that make Lubbock a better place to live for everybody.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute for your opening statement.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Massengale. I grew up here in Lubbock. I went to Monterey High School, graduated from Texas Tech. I've been a small business owner since I was 16. I joke that I've never had a real job. My wife is here tonight. We've been married for 24 years. We have a daughter that is in college. We're very proud of her. My businesses today were retailers, the Matador and Advanced Graphics. Early out of college, I committed myself to public service, cut my teeth with a group that helped Texas Tech transition from the Southwest Conference to the Big 12. From there, I was asked to lead the Chamber of Commerce and was chairman of the board of the Chamber of Commerce in 2002. I ran for school board in 2006 and served for 8 years where I was the president of the board. Most recently, I've served 8 years on the city council. I've served as mayor pro tem. I come to you with more finance background and policy background than anyone else running today.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute for your opening statement.
Yes, I'm a lifelong resident of Lubbock, along with my wife of 41 years, Cindy, who's here tonight. My kids live here. My grandkids live here. So that's my future is here in Lubbock. That's why it's important to me. I've also owned several businesses in town, one of which was J&B Coffee Company. It's still operating. I don't own it anymore, a popular hangout for a lot of people, but I've been a practicing attorney for the past 22 years. I've been on the city council for 2 years now, representing District 3, which is an interesting district. It's probably the most diverse district in all of Lubbock. It resides entirely within the loop, and that has the most diversity economically, racially, politically, any way you cut it. So it's a great district to represent. But when our current mayor decided he wasn't going to run again, I had to make a choice about whether or not I felt like there was something I could offer to the public. And my campaign theme is a choice for a new direction. And I believe that we do need to go in a new direction here in Lubbock towards more openness with our public. And we want to focus on reducing crime. And I'll talk more about everything else later.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute for your opening statement.
Yes, my name is Stephen Sanders, and I'm a lifelong citizen of Lubbock, except for when I went to the military. I was stationed at Fort Bragg, where I was a 92 Yankee unit supply specialist. I came back home, met my wife, who I've been married to for 16 years. She is at home with all of our kids right now, running people around, because all of the kids have 2 or 3 events that they got to be at. So I'm here. And the reason that I'm here is because I care about all of you. My wife is a teacher with the Lubbock Independent School District for 16 years. She is very, very smart, and I think she's probably the reason that, most of the reason that I'm here, because she pushes me very hard, and I appreciate her. I really care about you guys, and I want you to understand that it is time to move in a new direction. And I've been on the campaign trail since 2018, and just learning how things work and learning how to understand different people and hearing what people have to say and the issues that they deal with. And I believe that I'm equipped to deal with all of those issues at this point, and I'm going to do my best.
That brings us to our prepared questions. First question. A lot of the candidates have addressed public safety as a major concern and priority. What does that mean, and what would your approach be to improve public safety? Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond.
Well, public safety is paramount. It's job one for the city council. We have an opportunity. Many of you might have seen the news tonight where the city managers released the finalists for the police chief. I think it's important to make the right hire for the police chief, one that understands how to hold people that commit crimes in our community accountable, and one that knows and understands how to lead our officers. It's important that the city and the city council continue to provide resources for our officers. Crime is unfortunately an issue in a prosperous city like Lubbock, and the fight never ends, and so we must always continue to put up the fight. So my deal with public safety is it starts with that police chief, must have a council and city manager that holds him accountable and provide the adequate resources for them to do their job.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Again, when we keep coming up on a list of 5 most dangerous places to live in the United States, that's a problem we need to address. Most of our crime is gang and drug related. We need a police chief who has experience in that. We'll be looking at those candidates and making sure that we have someone who knows how to deal with that specific issue, which is the source of most of the violent crime, the murders and the shootings that we have in Lubbock. We also need to take care of our police officers. Morale is particularly low among our police officers. I'm committed to making sure that they have the pay and the training and the equipment that they need. They've endorsed me today. The Police Association has endorsed me today for mayor because they believe that I will have their interests at heart. And they know that I understand what it takes to get a handle on the problem of crime that we face in this city. It's our number one issue that we have to get control of, and I'll be dedicated and fully focused on that.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, public safety is the number one thing that we need to focus on, and with the new candidates that are going to be chosen from, the mayor, whoever the leader is going to be, needs to be supportive of that person, and also needs to be ready to help the police department and get the necessary things that they need to be effective. There's some different approaches that we can take. We've kind of shied away from being tough. We've become kind of light as a city, and we don't really hold people accountable the way we should. And I think that's the reason why people come here to do crime. And I think we've got to get back to the Western way where that train rolls up and they get off and they're like, well, we better get back on the train and go to the next city because this is the wrong place. And I'm going to bring that approach to it. And that's funny, but I mean that from everything within me because I care about all of y'all and I want you to be safe. I don't want to see people dying. And that's become normal here, and I don't like that.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so I have a history of working with LPD to deal with various community issues. I would continue to do that. There's also some other policy decisions that we could make to sort of help in the realm of policing. But one thing that hasn't been spoken about that I'd like to address is the very real public safety issue of loose dogs all over the city. A lot of people don't feel safe to walk their neighborhoods, let their kids play outside, and that's a shame. There's no reason why that should be the case here in Lubbock, Texas. And that issue has gone on for a really, really long time and has been allowed to get just out of control. I do have a comprehensive plan to deal with that. I don't have enough time in 30 seconds to tell you what that is, but we have to get a handle on that because that's a huge public safety issue for our seniors, for our kids, for our neighborhoods.
Our next question. A committee has been created to investigate and discuss the ongoing sewer line issue. That is going to be the responsibility of the next incoming council. As mayor, how will you come to a solution that fits the needs of the city, professional plumbers, and Lubbock citizens? Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond.
Of course, we, in the process of reversing that ordinance, it was a mistake in the first place. It's one of those things where a lot of times you make a decision as a council and then you hear back from the public about the effect of that decision on them, and you need to be able to respond to that. You don't need to just stick your plant your feet and say, no, we're not going to listen to people or the effect on them. And I was the first one to say we needed to revisit that and take another look at it. We do have plumbers who, one of the issues that we tried to address was the speed with which you can get work done on your sewer, because if you have a backup in your house, you want it taken care of quickly, and sometimes the city cannot get to it as quickly as you might like. So the solution that we need to look for is where people are given a choice of going private or have the city do it, depending on what their choice is, because different people will make different choices about that. But I think we'll be able to solve that problem as we look at it, to have sort of a bifurcated way of dealing with the situation. And I think that will meet the best needs of the citizens as we go forward. It's the biggest issue that's come up, I will tell you that.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, I don't want us to have the news and the city come after us to make the right decision in the beginning. I want to make the right decision first, and then what that takes is for us to be informed. A lot of the council people were uninformed, and they didn't have enough information to make that choice, and they were just kind of following the lead. And so we've got to do better with that. I want to make sure they have all the information that they need to make the right choice. And then if I make the right choice and lead them, maybe they'll follow in that, especially as a leader. And I'm going to guide them and make sure that they understand why it's important. We should never put things on the city that we've been taking care of since the beginning of time. I mean, like, that's serious business. $6,500, most people don't even have that much money within a year. Especially in this city with it being privatized. And so we've got to make sure that we're being honest and we're being fair with the people who live in this city, and that we actually really care about them and show them that through the actions that we make on the first time, not on the second time.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so this really started as a government transparency issue, which is something that I've advocated around for a very long time. And what I mean by that is it was passed in a consent agenda with no discussion by the council. Not one city council member, unfortunately, asked how much that was going to cost homeowners. When that happened, we reported that on Lubbock Compact Live, and the plan that I put forward on that day, I stand by today, and that is the city needs to hire its own crews. That's first and foremost. And then now with the aspect of plumbers, we also need to look at ways that we can collaborate with those plumbers, that we can bring local plumbers into this work so that, number one, it keeps costs down for folks, and number two, it alleviates that responsiveness issue that caused this decision in the first place.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yes, it has been a hot topic. A couple of things. One is on the final vote at City Council, I didn't participate in that vote. It was pulled off the consent agenda from what I understand. Nobody up there is beyond going back and rethinking something if we made a mistake. I was the one, along with Councilwoman Joy, that actually put it back on the agenda to reverse the ordinance. Give us time to sit back and relook at it. I support the committee. We've got to slow this process down. Reversing the ordinance does not resolve the responsiveness. We've got to make sure we can make sure city crews are responsive when they're needed in the alleys. We've also got to make sure that we're not overburdening property owners with expense related to the sewer line. The sewer line is stressful and expensive. So I look forward to the results of the committee, but we need to slow it down a little bit and make sure we get input from all the stakeholders.
Our next question. In a city where about 15% of voters turn out to vote, how do you intend to represent the entirety of Lubbock? Or how would you get more people sharing their voices and getting involved? Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond.
That's a big deal on my platform, unity, bringing the city together. And I believe that unity is the center, it should be the center of our community. And so if we bring that to the table, we also give ourselves a chance to become a stronger city. We understand how each other feel, and we understand the thought process that all the different people go through. Nobody thinks alike. And I think that once we come to the table, we can learn more about each other, and that would also help the mayor and the council be able to make the right decisions so that it's all about the majority and doing what's best for everyone at one time. It's a hard job, but it's a job that I'm willing to do, and I'm willing to take on and spend the time with it. It's going to take a lot of time, and I want to do that, and I'm available to do that. And I want to make sure that you guys feel safe and comfortable. People want to be likable. I don't want to be likable. I want to be trustable. I want you guys to trust me that I'm going to do the right thing and that I'm going to lead the council in the right direction.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so this is something that I've talked about for a very long time, trying to educate folks that actually less than 10% of our city for the last 4+ decades has chosen the mayor for the other 90%. That's the situation. There's been a couple of times when that changed, but for the most part, that's been the situation. And so what that has resulted in is a lot of similar leadership and a lot of similar actions and a lot of similar inactions. And we have that data for over 4 decades. We know what that looks like. So a lot of people are not really excited to move forward with that same old type of leadership. And so if you are tired of that, you want some sort of new leadership, some sort of new direction, then you need to bring yourself and 4 other people who normally don't come to vote in a May election with you to the polls to make your voices heard. And that's the only way that we're going to turn this around. And so I would continue to educate folks as I have been, and we do that every single day.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
The moderator's correct, and it's unfortunate, but we have very low voter turnout here. And you look at the candidates up here on the panel with me, we can make all the effort we want to, we can't pull them out. We've got to all work on it together. We're a better community if we all get out and vote. And so I think that's something we can all work on that voter turnout. As far as representing the entire electorate, I've done it before. I ran at large on the school board, which is similar to the mayor's race. I've tried to work hard as I represent District 4 to make sure I represent my constituency, but also I'm there to support all areas of the community. And I think you can see that in my work, whether it's related to public safety or downtown redevelopment, or even the efforts that I put forth related to our veterans community. I think my record shows that I represent and work hard for everybody.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Now, the number of voters is unfortunate. I don't think we can necessarily assume that they don't represent what the larger population necessarily thinks. But I do, as I said earlier, represent the most diverse district in all of Lubbock, economically, politically, educationally, ethnically, whatever you name. So through that process, I've learned how to try to balance the needs of a very diverse district and vote accordingly. So I think if I can translate to the city at large, that would give me the ability to represent the city well. But one of the things I think is very important on our city council is, citizens will come forward, like on the sewer issue or on the trash transfer station in West Lubbock, or the student housing that we're going up in different areas. They will come forward and make their opinions known to the council. And, if they feel like they're not heard, then that causes them to withdraw from the political process altogether. So part of my goal is to make sure that we listen better to our citizens and respect them more when they come before us.
Our next question. In a growing city, how do you balance new expansion with making repairs to pre-existing areas? Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond.
Okay, so one of the things that I was heavily involved in my advocacy work was impact fees. That helps with some of this. Another thing that I was involved in was changing the language of what's called the Gateway Street Projects Fund. This will open up more funds for road developments beginning in 2025. And the importance of that is that when we have funds available more locally, we don't have to rely so much on street bonds to raise such a big street bond. Now, we're going to have to do street bonds for a long time. But that's just some things that I've already done. The other thing that we have to do is we have to do a value per acre analysis across the whole city. This lets us know where we are getting value out of our city and where we're not getting so much value out of our city. And then we need to make more strategic decisions about how we develop so that we're financially stronger for the long term. And again, less reliant on debt.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Impact fees are a part of the solution to the question. One thing that is important to know about impact fees is in the central part of our community, there are no impact fees, or the roadway fees are zero. And the reason that is most of that's developed, and also to promote infill. When there are people that, developers or property owners that are looking at opportunities for infill, I think that's important. Maintenance, especially related to road maintenance, it always seems to be a hot topic. And over the past 8 years that I've been on the council, I've worked hard to move that from a debt-related expense to a cash-related expense. And it's not enough money. We were able to budget $13 million for road maintenance, which helps to address road repairs in our community, but at least the taxpayers are not burdened with debt associated with those street repairs.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
So again, in my district, the streets are already built out, so repair and maintenance of those streets is the main issue, whereas a newer area of town needs new streets altogether. So you have different ways of dealing with that situation. You have bonds, which our city has voted to a $200 million bond issue to build roads in newer parts of the city. But we are also moving money more and more into our regular budget to take care of maintenance of our streets, our older streets, or our existing streets. And that's important. We're pulling money out of the Gateway Fund to help do repair and maintenance of our streets. And so it's just a matter of balancing these two different sources of income to take care of streets and take care of maintenance of those streets and building new streets. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. I think when the public is allowed to have input into where the streets are going to be built. We formed a committee this last time that got together and presented that bond. When the citizens feel confident in that decision, they're willing to vote for it because they understand the need for growth as well.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Thank God for ARPA. That's been a help with some of the issues that we've had and making things better. I talked to Jared this morning. With the $968 million that we have, the budget is really tight already. The question becomes, are we doing things that we could not do and move that money to another place? Yes, we are. But the problem with that is who's going to be upset? Because things are already set. We have to think about what we're doing right now and making sure that we're not taking away from anything that we're already currently doing before we start to do other things. Should we be taking care of the streets that are inside the loop and the things that we already have? Absolutely, we should. And we should make that plan, we should make that a part of what we're really doing. I think we need to slow down when we do the budget. We do it too fast. I've said that before. They do it in about 2 days. I think we should take 2 weeks and give it enough time and make sure we look everything over. And I think that's fair for the citizens. And I think we could bring some of that to the citizens as well.
Our next question. It has become a stereotype in Lubbock that teenagers around here have nothing to do. Public pools and amusement parks have closed. With youth violence being a concern among many, what role does the city government play in providing services for that demographic? Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Thank you. Yes, it's unfortunate to lose Joyland. I think that was something that everybody enjoyed for a long period of time. That wasn't a city facility. The pools have garnered a lot of attention. You know, this is a product of not reinvesting in the pools. They're old to begin with. I think, you know, CLAP will be open at some point in time again next year. I hear lots of interest in other facilities coming online. Luckily, we have splash pads coming on, which require less personnel, less maintenance, but still allow people to enjoy them. Pools are a quality of life issue, you know, and they get quality of life gets pushed off at the bottom of the budget when you have limited resources. But I believe quality of life should still be a priority, parks and pools. And so I look forward to the CLAP that it could reopen, and I look forward to the day that the citizens might support some other type of facility.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
You do have to look at how a particular facility is used, a recreational facility, whether it's a park or a pool. And some of our pools did not get that much use, and part of it was because of the condition of them. They'd not been kept up with over the years. But part of it was just people had other ways and other venues that they went to for their recreation. So you do have to make sometimes hard choices about your money. If you're talking about keeping your streets repaired and paying your police officers enough, these are priority issues, and pools really fall further down the list. Not that they're not important, but you know, if you're trying to take care of your priorities, sometimes you do have to make difficult decisions, especially when we had pools that were underutilized and had terrific infrastructure and maintenance problems that were going to cost enormous funds to fix. We had 2 pools, I thought, CLAP and Maxie, that were worth trying to keep, but we couldn't keep I couldn't get Maxie open. But I think we will work hard to try to keep CLAP open, because I think having at least 1 pool is a good idea for Lubbock, and we'll try to do that.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I think it's going to come down to us going to the citizens with a bond. I looked at the percentage on community betterment bond, and it's about 50-50. And I think it's going to come down to having a charismatic mayor, someone who can encourage people to come and vote on a bond and make sure that they understand how much it's going to cost. It's not the raise on the taxes that people get mad about. They get mad about us doing things behind their backs. They just want us to come to them and give them an option to say yes or no, and that's where we got to go with that. And that's just being honest. Those pools are gone. They're irreparable, and we all know that. When May Simmons was first getting closed down, me and Phyllis Gant and Gordon Harris were down there trying to stop that. But guess what? They did it anyways. The pool was in bad shape, so we know that. Christy Martinez is trying to is pushing the idea of a facility for inside that's going to be open all year long. I think that we need to look at that.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
So I heavily advocated against the pools closing. At the time, I presented a couple of options that could have been looked at for funding. Those were, in the end, sort of disregarded, and they were closed. So the plan that I've had for this is basically we need outdoor pool facilities in every part of the city. We need to bring back those 3 that were closed. We also need to put some where there were none in the south, west, and now northwest to serve these new communities. We also need to have a centrally located indoor pool facility. The reason for this is that it can provide revenue for that pool system year-round, whereas your outdoor pools can't do that. Now, in terms of funding the initial construction, there's many things that can be looked at. Now, in terms of how is that done, we can't put up all of the costs all at once. That would be irresponsible and unmanageable. We need to phase it out, but we need to have a real comprehensive plan, and it's about investing into our community so that low-income people have options to have entertainment so that kids stay out of trouble, and it improves their quality of life, and it adds value to areas.
Our next question. More than 50% of property in Lubbock is owned by landlords, and as of last year, more than 40% of households in Lubbock are renters. When it comes to conversations about resident versus city responsibilities, how do you ensure renters are properly represented and accounted for in the conversation? Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, again, I think the priority is going to be homeowners. Renters will move from facility to facility frequently, but homeowners invest quite a bit in their homes. So I think you do have to address your homeowners' needs first. Renters are usually people who are occupying houses that someone else has as a source of income as a business. And one of the difficulties of that situation in a neighborhood like mine is frequently those are not taken care of. The landlords don't invest enough money in the maintenance of their houses. And so you're right next to someone who's trying to keep the value of their home up and takes care of their house, and then the landlord next to them is taking money out of that house, making money off that house, and not keeping it in good repair. That's not the renter's problem, that's the landlord's problem. And so, the solution to it is really directed more towards the landlord and making them responsible for the quality and maintenance of their homes so that it doesn't become a detriment to the home values of the other people in the neighborhood.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I think that we need to educate people on how to become a homeowner and what it takes. In order to become a homeowner, you've got to have your credit and all those things in place. A lot of people don't know that. I know people in East Lubbock who have credit good enough to have a $350,000 house, but they just don't know. They don't know. So they think renting is the way of life, and it's really not. So we've just got to educate people a little bit better and give them an opportunity to go out and make those moves. And they will do it if they understand how to do it. The truth is that people in that area have never had access to people who would teach them about stuff like that. Why do I know that? Because I lived over there for most of my life. My mother still lives there right now. And the people around her, when they die, those kids get those houses and they rent them out. Okay? We want to turn those houses, we want people to rebuy those houses and become owners and have equity and be able to sell homes and be able to do things in the future.
Mr. Hernandez, 1
Yes.
minute.
Oh, yeah. So the reason why we have about half of our city in a rental situation is because about 24% of our city is at the poverty level. Another 20% is what's classified as ALICE, which means they have a job, but they're barely making it. not a lot of extra money to spend on expenses. And so that's where you get into a situation where you have to rent. You're not able to build your credit. You're not able to do these things. And so we need to start to, again, hold these landlords accountable first and foremost. We don't really enforce our codes enforcement as we should today. We've got a lot of laws on the books that need to be enforced as they're written. And so there's some sort of breakdown happening there, and we need to figure out what that is and get that taken care of. There's also other things that could be looked at once we tighten those things up. If that's not helping, or if that's not fully alleviating the issue, you can look at things like rental registries that allow you to contact those owners a lot easier than if you don't have that. So there's things we can look at.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
One large factor for the reason that we have so many rentals in our city is because we're a college town. And, at any one point in time, the last number I heard we have is 60 to 70,000 college students converge on us in the fall. And that's important. But I think renters should be represented. I think you have to make sure you're in touch with the stakeholders too, which are the property owners that own those properties. Generally, a few bad actors are the ones that spoil it for the rest of us, and code enforcement is part of the solution on this. Code enforcement is a situation where you can't ever do enough, but the council has to push and set policy to make sure that you're holding those bad actors accountable. Again, stay in touch with the stakeholders is the way to keep them represented. I've already been endorsed by the Lubbock Apartment Association, which is the largest representation of those stakeholders. So I think that's what you do.
Now on to audience questions, which have been synthesized from responses to the survey provided by Texas Tech Public Media. Stray dogs is another concern of many Lubbock residents. How would you go about addressing that issue? Does a solution come from penalties and responsibilities for negligent owners, or supporting and expanding Lubbock Animal Services? Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I would actually support expanding it, and then in the expansion, we catch them, we neuter them, we spay them, and hopefully we get them back to their owners, and then we hold them accountable whenever their dogs are out. The other situation with this is that people's fences are broken, and they're not taking care of their homes. They're not taking care of the things that they already own. And so their dogs are just getting out. As Adam alluded to, the people are afraid to walk through their own neighborhood. And the only way to do that is for people to be responsible for their homes. It's not the city's job to go and fix your fence. But what we can do, and we need to expand the animal shelter anyways. And I also believe that we should be a no-kill zone all the way completely. I believe in that because I love animals. I have 4 dogs. But I also have to take care of those dogs. And if your dog gets hungry and there's a way to get out, your dog's going to get out. And he's going to go around. And when those dogs are hungry and they're running around, they are pissed off.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
So first and foremost, we need to expand the current animal control facility. It has not grown as fast as our city has grown. That's first and foremost. Second of all, we need proactive animal control officers that patrol the city on a daily basis and proactively get animals off of the street. A big part of this has to be spay and neuter. We need to look at expanding those programs. There's just not enough access to that right now. When you talk about feral cats, you need to, the city itself should be involved in what's called trap, neuter, and return. There's currently only one organization here doing that. It's too much work for one organization. Another thing that we need to have happen is better enforcement of the laws that we already have on our books, and some of that is under animal control, some of that is under LPD. For instance, when you see people selling puppies on the side of the road, that's illegal. That's supposed to be LPD. Some of these things are not being enforced, and so we need to better enforce those things, as well as do more outreach campaigns to let people know about services like being able to get their fence fixed or other services that animal control offers.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I talked to a voter yesterday about this, and my typical response is, first of all, we don't always have an animal problem or a dangerous animal problem. We have an irresponsible human being problem. And I'm not sure what the perfect solution is to that, but if I'm elected mayor, we will entertain a discussion at council about what we can do to expand resources. That's part of the solution, which might add more officers, more trucks out in the field. We've got to work closer with municipal court to hold people accountable. I think we need to look at the fines and how we cite people that are that constantly break the rules on this. And last, and I don't always advocate for this, but I do think that communication and some PR would go a long way to help people understand the problems we have with animals and how to handle your animals, how to be responsible for animals, and that it's not okay to dump animals, because unfortunately we have a lot of people that do that creates this problem.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Again, that's a real safety issue, and when something becomes a bigger problem, when it's a growing problem as it is in our city, then you really have to address it, and you have to be willing to move funds from, again, some things like pools, which were raised, which are nice to have, but it's not a safety issue. Stray animals oftentimes are. There's someone here in this crowd tonight who lost a brother to a dog attack. So, we have to make sure that our streets are safe, our children are safe when they're outside. Expansion of that facility may be necessary, but we need to do a better job, I think, working with a lot of our local agencies that do have ways to find adoptions for these animals. The spay and neuter program is a great way of doing it, but sometimes I think we don't help our community know what all the resources are, but we do need to enforce our laws that are on the book regarding our stray animals, and stricter enforcement is something I think we need to move to.
Our next question. In your view, what has the current mayor and city council of Lubbock gotten right? What are they doing really well? And by contrast, what have they gotten wrong? Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Thank you. So I think one thing they got right was doing the street bond. I think that was an important need. I'm glad that they got that done. Whether they did it right the first time or not, I do give them kudos for taking back the sewer alley line issue. I think that it takes a lot to put yourself out there and stand firm in a decision and get a lot of backlash, and knowing that people are going to say, oh, well, you just reversed yourself because you got the backlash, which may be partially true, but it still takes a lot to do that. So I give them kudos for at least doing that, hearing the citizens, and reversing it versus just, digging in and not changing anything. So I definitely think there's some redeeming qualities there.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
What has the city done right? I think there's been some great things around public safety. I think there's some great things around downtown revitalization that the city has done right. I think, although it's a long process, I think at the end of the day, the UDC and the comprehensive land use plan that looks at our zoning is a step in the right direction. Where could the city improve? In my opinion, responsiveness. If I'm mayor, I'll lead this new council quickly to a discussion about how to be more responsive. And it's not that we don't have a culture of responsiveness, but sometimes we get our eye off the ball. 30-minute hold times on phones is not acceptable. And so whether that's PD or LP&L or Animal Services, as mayor, I'd really like to work on creating a culture that we may not always have the right answer, but we're going to respond to you quickly as citizens.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, we had two instances where developers wanted to build high-density student housing in older developed neighborhoods, and I was able to lead a coalition of our council on both of those issues to defeat those two projects that I think were totally inappropriate for the neighborhoods they were being built in, because those developers were wanting us to change the zoning laws to basically do away with all the restrictions and setbacks and density rules that are there for the protection of the neighborhoods nearby and the homeowners nearby. So I think that was good. I think we did right last year not raising your taxes, setting the tax rate for the first time in my memory at the no new revenue rate. When people are going through tough times and their income isn't keeping up with inflation and their costs are going up, then we need to take care of that. This year, I think we got it wrong. I was the only one to vote against raising your taxes this year. I think when people were even in tougher situations this year, we should not have done that. I also want a better attitude towards and more respect towards the people who come before the council. That's another thing that I think is important.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I think what we're doing right is we're not swiping the card anymore, and I think that's important. We're not adding a ton of debt. The only things that we do swipe the card for right now are the big trucks with the platforms. Those cost about $1.4 million, and they give you a lifetime about 5 to 7 years after they're paid off. So those are good investments, and so we should keep doing that. I think that's going to be big for us in the future to keep up with that. But I think that we moved too fast on the transfer out there. Thankfully, some people on the council wanted to slow it down and relook at that and make sure that we're doing all the things right with that. Yesterday during the forum at Mother Guadalupe, Lady Guadalupe, we talked about making sure those roads are finished before we do that project. I stand on that, and I will continue to uphold those promises that I made, and I think that's going to be really important.
Next question. Shortage of foster homes in Lubbock. We are sending kids all over the state because we have a shortage of foster homes, and it is a detriment to family connections and reunification. How will you be bringing awareness to the foster shortage in Lubbock? Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, the cities doesn't directly affect foster homes, but I think it's an issue in our community. We recently had the Go Blue kickoff that encompassed several agencies in town that support those children that are in the foster program. Stories are sad, and it's unfortunate for those children, but luckily we have great nonprofit agencies that support us, like, I think of CASA. I think the Sheriff's Department does some things. But I think we have to, the city, in whatever way they can support those agencies in their mission.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Very similarly, foster care, of course, is run by the state. It's not really a city issue, something that we can address directly. We can certainly encourage nonprofits in Lubbock, which are a vital part of that foster process. Some of you may have seen some of these, the Heart, I forget what their name is, but it's where they have photographs and stories about foster kids, and they'll put them up in your churches or different places of business where you become aware of children that have needs. It's a wonderful program to get these children into long-term homes and good homes. So really, for the city's part, it's finding ways to promote that, participate as well as we can with the communication aspect of fostering. So it's an extreme need in every city. And so, yes, I can support communication, but we don't have a direct responsibility for the foster care situation.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I believe that I stand on being pro-life, and I feel like some of my counterparts in the Republican Party have dropped the ball in this aspect because we're not giving these kids an opportunity. We say we want people, we don't want to kill babies, but then we don't give them an opportunity. We don't find them nowhere to live. We don't have no funding. We don't want to be a part of that situation, and that's wrong. That's wrong. So I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything I can. I've worked with the Nature Center. I've worked with CASA. I've worked with all those people to advocate, and I'm going to continue to do that. Even before Bart Raker got in trouble, I was working with him and them. And so I believe that that's going to be a really important thing. And it's got to be somebody charismatic, again, somebody that actually cares. Somebody that really cares about what happens to people that they can't necessarily do something for, that don't live under their own roof. A lot of times people don't care about people if it doesn't affect them. You don't care about things because it doesn't affect you personally.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
So I think one thing that I've seen lacking in city leadership is any sort of initiative to be an advocate on behalf of the city when it's something that is outside of our power or our control. I'm not a fan of ever saying we can't do anything about it. I, as an individual, can go out and advocate. I do advocate for foster organizations and have been learning a lot more about that. But the city leadership, outside of its role in council, can go and advocate for these things. Also, one thing that we do as a council is we set legislative priorities for the city, and we actually send people to go lobby for that whenever the state legislature meets. We need to be more attentive to what our community is saying, because a lot of the foster care system relies heavily on what the state does. And so we can advocate for those things, understanding the gravity of the issue that we have here with 300 plus infants with nowhere to go tonight.
We additionally have some questions that were submitted this evening by individuals in attendance. One of those questions: what city amenities/services would you consider cutting in order to prevent tax increases? Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, and I am an advocate for not raising your taxes as much as possible. There are times where you absolutely have to do that. That's really the city manager's job. Again, we don't go in and start pointing to different places within the budget. We tell our city manager what we want the tax rate to be. We tell them what our priorities are. And these are areas you don't touch. In my case, it's going to be your police and your fire. Those are your absolute priorities. Your streets come next. And so he has to go, you direct him to find those cuts in other areas, lower areas, not essential areas, things that sometimes we call them quality of life. And quality of life is important. And you can work on those issues when people's incomes are keeping up with inflation, and then you can increase taxes, you can raise taxes in those times. But part of the issue too is our city has good reserves, and sometimes you have to dip into those reserves in tough times to make sure that you meet the needs of the city, but you build up those reserves in good times so that you can maintain some of these quality of life issues through hard times without having to cut them.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I will not cut amenities because people need the things that we provide. They need those things. And that's been something that's been very, very, very important. There's a lady here that talked to us at the 100 Black Men Forum about what we would do for our community and the kids that are in our community. And cutting amenities is definitely taking a step towards hurting them. And I'm not going to do that. I think we can find a way, but it's going to take us going to the drawing board, like I've told you. We can't sit up here and promise things to you that we haven't been able to plan on. And I will go to the drawing board with the city manager and figure out what we can do, and then bring that to the council and see what they think. And there's a process that we need to go through with that. I think it's a great question, but I think it takes some planning and some talking and some collaborating.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, when you're put in a situation where you're looking at cutting services, it means that you have somehow mismanaged your land use in a city. The way that a city gets its income, its revenue, is from how it uses its land, what's allowed to be done, what's not allowed to be done, et cetera. We have to really look at how we develop our city. And the simplest way I can put this is this idea of the 15-minute city. Now, it's not supposed to mean what Lubbock currently says, where you could drive anywhere in 15 minutes. It's supposed to mean you're supposed to be able to walk most places you need to in 15 minutes throughout your day. All right, we can create more of those 15-minute cities across the city. This creates not only quality of life improvements there and economic improvements in those areas, but it also creates destinations that then allow you to improve the quality of your public transit, where it'll actually be used, right? And then it becomes a wealth multiplier versus just something you slap all over a city that you've built only for cars. And so when you do that, you have more money for services, more money for all these sorts of things, and you stabilize property values across the city.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
First off, you look at our charter, no mayor has the authority to just go in and tell the city manager how to set the tax rate and what to prioritize. That's a council decision. This is why you promote growth. That's why growth is so important, is so we can take advantage of our growth, our increase in our tax base every year, so that we can pay our bills in our general fund. I can't support cutting any particular amenity, or you want to call it a mini product of the general fund. We're in one today. You know what? Maybe we're going to not support taxes or a slight tax increase so that we can get rid of the libraries. You know, everybody every little piece has their own constituency, and they use those things. So where you go first is large public projects related to the general fund. That's what we've done. We did it this past year. You have to delay those projects so that you can still continue to provide basic services out of the general fund to the entire constituency.
Our next question. What are your plans, if any, to make Lubbock more bike/pedestrian friendly while responding to sprawl in the city? Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will give Adam some props. I think he's got a good plan on that, and that's something that I would actually look at doing, just being honest. But I will also say that I'm concerned with the bikers. We've had bikers being killed. People are not paying attention. And there's some things that we can do. We can put some things in place that will penalize people a little bit more tougher for not paying attention and being reckless when they drive. So we've got to raise the ante and make sure that we're letting people know that they're not going to get away with hurting our people. And then we've got to make sure we got those bike lanes in the right places so that people can be safe. Because some people do ride scooters and some people do. I see people all the time. And it's not up to me to tell them to get a car. They might not be able to afford a car. So if they got a scooter and that's how they moving, then I want to support them in that. And I'm going to do that. And so I know that people want that. I've seen it in all of my stuff, and I'm going to support the city on the things they want. It ain't about me. It's about y'all.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so back to this idea of the 15-minute cities. Obviously, we've got a very big city, so you could create lots of these across the city, and obviously that's not going to happen overnight. But that's a big part of it. And what goes into that is road design is a big part of that, and that your road design is what really dictates the safety of that road. Now, if you have a straight road and you put a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on there, people are still going to drive 60 because it's a wide, straight road. That's what their mind tells them to do. You can design your streets to produce the safe speed that you want drivers to do intuitively, and so we need to look at doing that. And then we also need to look at being more strategic with how we try to implement bike lanes and things of this nature, because again, you can't slap these things on a bad design and expect people to use them. They're still not safe. And so we really have to take a holistic, comprehensive look at this, bring all of the stakeholders to the table, and move forward from there.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I think it's important in the right parts of town to make sure streets are bike-friendly, pedestrian-friendly, and vehicle-friendly. If you look at some of the streets we're building right now, the city has adopted the complete streets model. Take from my district, for example, in District 4, 114th Street. You have 10-foot sidewalks. You've created a situation. It's lit the proper way. It has access for wheelchairs. Down here in this part of our community, the Texas Tech to where we are here in downtown, this is the most walkable portion of our community. We've done some work on Broadway. We need to do some more work on Broadway. The work that TxDOT is doing in the Take Back program on Avenue Q is all about making it more walkable between the Overton area and downtown Lubbock. So I think it's important to make those features a priority on streets when you build them.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Again, my area of town is near Tech, so there's quite a lot of bike lanes there in that part of town, and that's where they need to be because you have a whole lot more use. I'm not for expanding bike lanes throughout the city unless there's a proven need for it and a proven use for it. If the use increases, then we can do that. But currently, I don't really feel the need to expand the bike lanes that we have until there's evidence of more heavy use. I will say that one of my concerns in Lubbock people like to drive. One of my concerns is making our traffic patterns more efficient so people do get more efficiently across town and don't have to stop as much because that affects our environment when cars are sitting there and idling and not getting people where they need to be. So I'm really a little bit more concerned about traffic patterns than bike patterns in our city. But if the need is there, we can certainly do that because I would like to encourage that. But that's going to have to be a lead from the bikers themselves.
Next question. The list of police chief finalists was released this afternoon. None of the finalists are from within the Lubbock PD. Do you believe senior administrative positions, like chief of police, should exclude or include local candidates? Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Obviously it's a case-by-case basis, but in terms of where LPD is right now, I think absolutely. I think there's lots of qualified people that you could have pulled from the department. And I really, just personally, I haven't seen the list, so I don't know who those folks are, and it's no dig at anybody from outside of the city. I think as a whole, we need to look to us first before we start to look outside. Now, if there's some capability we don't have, if there's some expertise we don't have, and we just absolutely don't have it, all right, look outside. We've got plenty of people here. I think you discount our people here. I think you demoralize our people here when every single time a promotion comes up or something like this comes up, you're reaching outside automatically and leaving the people who live here out of it. I don't know what the reasoning behind that decision was, but I would say absolutely yes. We should try, if at all possible, to recruit from within our ranks.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
So by our charter, the hiring of the police chief is the city manager's job. It's not the council's job. I feel certain, I don't know who all applied for that job. There may have been some internal candidates. I think internal candidates should be given every shot. We do have a morale issue in the department right now. It's unfortunate that Chief Mitchell wasn't successful here, but we've got to get it right. And I trust the city manager to make a good decision. The council and public's going to get to meet these candidates next week. I've said it before, and I'll ask them when I meet them. I want to know what their stance on crime is. My business was a victim of crime today. People are tired of it. Neighborhoods are tired of crime, and we can't snap our fingers and fix it, but we can do a better job. And so that's what I'll be looking for when I visit with these candidates next week.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I definitely hope their stance on crime is they're against it. So, but I don't think the issue is so much where they come from, inside or outside. It's that we get the right leadership, and that's the most important choice. I got to trust that our city manager has done a very good job of looking at all the possibilities, and for whatever reason he has, these are the best that he's brought forward to us. I have spoken with a lot of police officers, and I think this is probably the best situation for the police department to go outside and find the right person to come in and lead. We do have a morale issue. We do have a lot of decisions we have to make, and I think sometimes you do need fresh eyes on it. But bottom line is we need a police chief who has experience and a history wherever he comes from reducing gang and drug-related crime. That's our greatest issue, and that's where we need the focus to be.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
A two-part answer. The city manager does locate those candidates, and then he takes those candidates before the council, and the council is able to make a decision and say a yay or a nay. And I think that's really important, and that's how that works. I talked to Jared about it to make sure I knew what I was talking about. That way I'm not up here just saying some stuff. Secondly, we cannot hire. I did a survey. In my team, we did a survey on the police officers, and the majority of them do not want someone from inside. And there's a reason for that. And many of them said that they would leave the force if we hired from within inside. We don't need to lose any police right now. That's the last thing we need to do. So I think that getting a police chief from the outside is definitely the right move. And I'll stand on the fact that I care about how the officers that already work on our force feel, and if they feel like they're gonna be uncomfortable with somebody that's already inside, I want to stand against that.
Next question. Give me an example of something you changed your mind about. This should be after you spoke to a voter and got a different perspective. Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, I think the biggest one is the sewer. The sewer lateral. The information we had at the time, I'm not sure that we had all the information related to it. When I heard what it was costing, in the right-of-way and what it was costing property owners, I felt like it was time to take another look at it. It's, with all the utility infrastructure that we have now, it's become more complex. It's a different issue today than it was in '06 or when we started or when we chartered the city. I mean, we have we all know we've got fiber optics installed in our alleys now, and that complicates this sewer thing. So, I think it's important for everyone to understand that when you sit there, or at least when I'm sitting there, I'm not above relooking at a decision that I've made, and I'm willing to take feedback on it if we got it wrong and make it right.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, I've already spoken about the sewer issue, and that was a definite one, so I'll mention another one, was the trash station over in West Lubbock. And again, that was brought to us by a committee of our staff, or a group of our staff who did their analysis and told us this is the best location for us to put this. And I am not criticizing our staff. Our staff are doing their job. They did their analysis, but they weren't thinking of all of the considerations that citizens might be thinking of. They were looking at it primarily in a financial way or time of travel. There were a lot of things they looked at. But when then you bring that forward, and one of our problems was we did not communicate that well enough to the community. So when you don't do that, then when you go and want the zoning changed and you have to send out the notices to change the zoning, that's when the public becomes aware of it directly, and they come in force, either email or come to the city council and say, wait a minute, we don't want this. This is not good for our neighborhood. The roads aren't adequate. So that's the area I think I want to look at.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
The one thing I changed my mind about was I've been running for mayor since 2018, and Trey beat us last time, and I've lost. I haven't won, and I thought about getting out of the fight, and I decided that was not what I was going to do. I changed my mind, and I was like, I'm going to stay in the fight for these people that I love and that I care about in this city. I don't care what color you are, where you come from, where you live, how much money you got, how many businesses you have. I care about you because that's who I am. And that's who God created me to be, and to be in this fight and support you guys. The second thing is that when I first got into this, I thought that the charter was okay, and I don't think the charter is okay. I think we got to go back and revisit the charter and make some adjustments to our charter, because we kind of got our hands tied in some areas that we need to make moves in, and we can't because of the way our charter is. It's old, it's outdated, and I think that we've got to look at that. So I changed my mind about that. And I've also changed my mind about how mad I am at all these guys up here that I'm running against. No, I'm just playing.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so one thing that I changed my mind about that I expected to was my animal control plan. And what I mean by that is how I go about policy is first and foremost getting that feedback from the community. I don't come up with these things out of thin air, right? So I take the feedback from the community. What are those needs? What do they need addressed? And it's my job in my mind to go and find the policy steps that make that happen. And so with the dog issue, I went and researched what was happening around the country, what's been successful in other places, and sort of put together a base plan. But I'm not an animal control expert. I'm not a rescue person. I don't do that. So I put it out there to the public, and through a lot of feedback, a lot of great ideas, and that's still ongoing. So I expect my mind to change some more. I've talked to SPCA. I've talked to all sorts of rescues. I've talked to everybody that deals with this, animal control services. And so that's just sort of how I do policy. So I kind of expect my mind to change when I'm dealing with people who are more expert than I am.
Next question. When will Lubbock get a residential recycle program? Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, before we get an effective recycle program, we actually have to have a facility that will be able to recycle things. Currently, we have to ship a lot of that off, and it's not economically feasible to do that. There's a cost to recycling, and so it has to be economically feasible before the program will actually work. We do have plans for that. That's part of the plan for the transfer station, and I'm not against the transfer station at all. My issue was where it was located and whether we are ready for that facility there or whether we needed to look at it elsewhere. But that is part of the design of that facility, is a recycling part of it that will allow us to be actually a central location to bring in recyclable material from other areas around us and not have to ship all that product off to other locations far away, which is very expensive. So we will be getting one. It is on our drawing boards, and we're planning for that. I'm not sure exactly when that will happen. It will be part of probably an additional bond plan in the future, but it is on the drawing boards as part of this facility.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I think it's important, but I think it's a twofold deal. I think that the mayor and the council have got to work with the businesses and the people about using items and materials that are recyclable and not one-use type of containers and plastics. We've got to really look at that. And I think the Go Green situation is something that my counterparts in the Republican Party like to ignore. We don't like to think about being clean and having good air and the pollution and all the things that happen whenever we don't recycle. Because when we don't recycle, that stuff just it's in the ground and it gets blown over. We have enough dirt to cover up any kind of trash that's on the ground here in Lubbock, and so we've got to be proactive about that. And I think it's so. Like I said, it's twofold. We get the facility, make sure the facility is capable of separating the trash. There's some different mechanisms that we can use inside that building, but we.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, so I know Miss Brenda Haney very well. She's the director of solid waste, and she's one of the best in the country, literally. Hopefully, the city of Lubbock doesn't do what they've been very effective at, and we don't lose her. So, because we really do need her leadership in that role. This is something that she's been working on. I've had conversations about this with her on a few occasions because this is something that is very important to our community. Many people have brought this to me. And so the short answer is we don't know. I can tell you that Ms. Haney is working that plan out. It's not necessarily the normal sort of recycling that's the issue. It's the glass recycling that's very expensive, and there's all sorts of complicated things to that. And so she could explain that much better to you than I, but I do know that it's in the works, and we just don't know. I wish I could tell you a definitive date.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I would love for us to have a residential recycling program. If I've been asked once, I've probably been asked 40 times about it. It's not financially feasible. We'd love for it to be. Part of our problem is where Lubbock's located in proximity to everybody else. I mean, it's one thing to do it in Dallas where they have all the in process to recycle those, but the transportation cost is expensive. We've had a glass crusher at one point in time. It broke. It was cost prohibitive to fix it. Solid waste doesn't feel like the ratepayers at solid waste would support a fee associated with it at this time. So I think it's an issue that we stay vocal about. Council needs to continue to push. I think we're getting closer to it to be financially feasible as we grow, but it's not that we don't want it. It's just that it doesn't make financial sense at this point in time.
Our last question before candidates give their closing statements. What are you most worried about, and what are you most excited about for Lubbock in the next 2 years? Mr. Sanders, 1 minute to respond to the question.
I'm worried about the marijuana situation. I think it's because we tie the police's hands, and they're unable to do their jobs. And what happens is, so we all know that when most people who have that amount of marijuana, 4 ounces worth, they got something else, or they're doing something else. And most people who do smoke weed don't roll around with 4 ounces of it. And that's an issue. So it has uncovered some other things for us so that we can make the big bust. Everybody say they want to be safe. Everybody wants to be safe. This is a part of public safety. It's a part of public safety. I'm against drugs. I am. I don't care how anybody feels about that. And I think that the mayor should be advocating to make sure that we are being safe and that we're giving the police an opportunity to make the big bust on the fentanyl and the stuff that's killing our people. Because most of the time, they find that stuff.
Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I'm worried about is how we develop our city. I'm worried about what we leave for our children and our grandchildren. You and I are going to be fine. We're going to be able to drive up and down Milwaukee from 34th to 98 and drink all that good wine and eat all that good food and go to those fun places. You and I are going to be just fine. What about our children and grandchildren? Are they going to drive by those same places and see a slum or see crumbling infrastructure? That's what we need to be worried about. And so that's why I'm so focused on how we develop our city, how we choose to do that. And so that's the number one thing that I'm concerned about and why I'm concerned about that. The thing that I'm excited about that we've seen during this election cycle in particular is the amount of energy, the amount of engagement from the citizens in this political process this election cycle. That's exciting to me. I think that it's the best way that it should be, right? We should have as many voices as possible contributing to the conversation and informing themselves and making the decision about who's going to lead this city.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Thank you. I'm worried about the basic services that the city provides, specifically infrastructure. We're behind on our street infrastructure. We're fortunate to have the bond that passed in 2022, but we haven't had a road bond for 13 years prior to that. I'm worried about roads like Broadway. I'm worried about connectivity to Loop 88. So there's so many opportunities, but we're behind the curve. I'm excited about things like water and the work that people have done that came before us to make sure we have such a robust water supply. I'm excited about Lubbock's great economy. It's diverse. It never sees the highs of the highs or the lows of the lows. It's a great place for small business to thrive. And we see the growth today. We've seen that I don't think the growth will slow down. And so I think that provides so many more opportunities for us as we push the community forward.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute to respond to the question.
Well, we've all talked about what is my most immediate concern is the crime problem that we have and the shootings on a regular basis and the murders, and it's mostly drug and gang related. So getting a new police chief and our police force capable of dealing with that issue is the most important thing to me, because that is what will affects the quality of life for everybody in this city. And it also is one of the things, we see the people say this is one of the five, or the news articles say this is one of the 5 worst places to live for crime, but also one of the 5 best places to live in the country for the cost of living. So those are two sides of one coin. If we can fix the crime problem, everybody knows that this is a great place to live. You can make it here in Lubbock on your income. And so Lubbock will grow. It's an attractive place for people to come. We may not have all the opportunities that some other places have, but it's a great place to have a business, to raise a family. And if we can make it a safe environment, then I think the one thing I'm concerned about, if we can fix that, then the thing I'm excited about, Lubbock will remain a great place. The other thing is Lake 7. Got to get Lake 7.
Candidates will now have 1 minute to make their closing statements. Mr. Hernandez, 1 minute.
All right, so we can absolutely improve the public health and safety of this city. We can make quality of life improvements across the city. We can absolutely do those things, and we can become financially stronger for the long term and less reliant on debt while we do that. And we should do that not only because for our people that live here, but we should do that also because we should be thinking about our future and about the future of those who will inherit this city. And so that's what my vision is for this city. I've had a track record of working on this plan. There's several pieces that I've had in motion way before I even knew I was going to run for mayor. This is something that I've been committed to and working on for a long time. And in fact, I'm the only candidate up here who has been actively working on every single thing in my platform for the last several years. And I will continue to do that work. I will continue to collaborate across the city to get results. Thank you.
Mr. Massengale, 1 minute.
My vision for our city is to make sure it's the best place to raise a family, work, and have a business. Nobody here running for mayor today has the experience or brings the experience I have to the job. On May 4th, we're going to have, I don't know of another time where we have 4 new council people elected and a mayor. The seasoned council people have been there for 2 years. We've got to make sure we have an experienced mayor to lead our city moving forward. My record stands on its own. The work I've done at Lubbock Independent School District, making schools more efficient that serves students better. The work I presented to the council to create the Public Safety Improvements Project and bring police closer into neighborhoods with patrol division stations. The concept presented to bring South Plains College to downtown Lubbock. We're the largest city in Texas that didn't have a community college presence. And finally, I work for our veterans, the State Veterans Cemetery. I was the tip of the spear on all that work involved in that.
Mr. McBrayer, 1 minute.
Well, experience is important, but the experience I think I focus on is what the experience of the average citizen and taxpayer in Lubbock is. That's what's most important. How do they see their city? How do they see their city government? Is it responsive to them? Is it meeting their needs? Is it doing what it needs to control the crime problem? Is it keeping their taxes low so that they can actually make it on their incomes here in Lubbock and take care of their family and provide for their family? Or is the city always raising their taxes and taking more out of their pocket so that the city doesn't have to make any cuts in its budget? That's the kind of experience I'm talking about. The quality of life in our neighborhoods is vitally important. We don't live in a city so much as we live in neighborhoods. When you go out your door, what is it like? What's your neighborhood like? What's the park like? Are they safe? Are your kids safe? From crime, from dogs. Those are the kind of things that I think affect people, and that's the kind of experience is important to me, and I want to make sure that Lubbock citizens have the quality of experience that they deserve.
Mr. Sanders, 1 minute.
My motto is putting the city at the heart of every decision that I make, and I think that's going to be important. And the transparency. On the last question, I didn't get to answer what I was excited about. I'm excited that we get to move in a different direction. We've been doing things a certain way for quite some time. And there's some other leaders who are capable of doing that and taking things in a new direction. And so I'm really excited about that. Whether I win or not, I'm just excited that we get to move past the place we've been for so long. We've been stagnant and we haven't been able to really reach our potential. We've always had a ceiling on, but I think there's some people in place that can help us fly, and we can spread our wings and do some really good things, be open-minded, be kind, and not be demeaning, and care about these people. At the end of the day, we do have a lot of things we need to do, but we need to have somebody who has a heart for people, who loves people, who wants to hear what people have to say. Open door policy, call me, my number's out there. You can come by the house, I'll cook you some food, whatever it takes, doesn't matter to me.
Thank you. This concludes the formal portion of the forum. I'd like to thank all of those that submitted questions. Thank you again to all of our candidates. Thank you to the organizations who put on the forum. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And a reminder that Election Day is May 4th. Thank you.